Attorney General Merrick Garland is expanding the Justice Department's efforts to protect all Americans at the ballot box. In an address last week, he announced actions aimed at protecting voting rights. He also said he would confront recent state and local efforts that could make it harder to vote.
There are many things that are open to debate in America, but the right of all eligible citizens to vote is not one of them. The right to vote is the cornerstone of our democracy, the right from which all other rights ultimately flow.
For more on this, I want to bring in Sean Sullivan. He's a CBSN political contributor and a White House reporter for The Washington Post. Hi, Sean. Great to see you. So break down for us, if you will, Garland's announcement and how will it impact voting on a very practical level?
Well, Tanya, what we heard from the Attorney General were a number of specific steps that the administration is going to take in the future on the issue of voting. So the first thing, and perhaps the most significant in the eyes of a lot of activists that I've talked to, is the fact that they are doubling the size of the Voting Rights Division. So this means more attorneys working on voting cases. The department is also going to be scrutinizing both these new laws that Republican-led state legislatures are passing in some key states on voting, and they're going to be looking at existing laws as well to see, do these laws and should these laws actually exist based on existing precedent and laws, or are they discriminatory? Because critics of a lot of these Republican-led voting laws have said that they are discriminatory and that they are particularly harmful to voters of color. Beyond that, the Department of Justice is also signaling that they are going to be scrutinizing these post-election audits that we've seen some supporters of former President Donald Trump spearheading. We see right now in one county in Arizona, a post-election audit happening there, even though it's important to note that there has been no evidence of fraud in that state or really in any state right now. And so the Department of Justice is saying, look, not only are we going to take on these Republican laws, but we're also going to be a close eye on these audits. And they're signaling that they're not going to be allowing intimidation of voters, and they're also not going to be allowing intimidation of poll workers and election workers. So taken together, this was the most substantive step that we've seen from this administration on the issue of voting. And they are under a huge amount of pressure right now from their base, from their party, to act on this. There's a lot of dissatisfied Democrats who say this administration has needed to do more. And I think this is a step that some administration officials hope will begin to satisfy some of those critics from within the Democratic Party.
Absolutely. And to that point, you have reporting that some Democrats are now asking the White House to shift from prioritizing infrastructure and focus on voting rights instead. Can you tell us about this and why they've made that decision?
Yeah, it's a really interesting shift we've seen in the last couple of weeks here. Many of the Democrats I've talked to look at the president's agenda and they say, okay, he's focused primarily on this infrastructure bill right now. This has been the focal point of all of his travel. This has been the focal point of much of his cabinet, many of the Oval Office meetings he's had. He's negotiating this bill directly, but it hasn't moved forward particularly quickly. Still negotiating with Republicans. It's been a long and sort of slow-moving process, and this is making a lot of Democrats anxious. They say, look, right now we've really got to pass some legislation on Capitol Hill that deals directly with what the Republicans are trying to do in these states. And they point to a bill that's already passed the House. This bill is called the For the People Act, sits in the Senate now. And what they want is they want to see the president push harder for this bill, try to use more of his political influence to get this thing passed, and maybe scale back a little bit of his efforts on infrastructure. They see the voting issue as a more urgent task right now from this White House, and they want to see the White House do more. We saw the steps, as we just talked about, that the Justice Department has taken. But a lot of activists say, look, this legislation goes farther. We need something like this to happen. And so you see a little bit of friction right now in the party in this debate about what the focus should be on. Should it be infrastructure? Should it be jobs, the economy? This is the core of what the White House thinks their focus should be on. Or should it be on the issue of voting, the issue of voting rights? And we're seeing that debate play out pretty publicly. We're seeing some prominent Democrats openly call on the White House to put more energy and more effort into passing legislation on Capitol Hill right now.
And the Senate is expected to take up the For the People Act later this month. What can you tell us about that, and can we expect it to pass?
Well, there's one big problem for Democrats right now, and his name is Senator Joe Manchin. He opposes this act. Every other Democratic senator has not only come out in support of this, but they actually co-sponsored this legislation. But Manchin, who is a centrist Democrat from West Virginia, has said, look, I don't want to support this thing. It's not bipartisan. He's pointed to the fact that Republicans don't support this. So it's a really, really tall climb for Democrats right now. And look, even if they had Senator Manchin's support, that would not give them enough to pass this thing in the Senate. They would have to then change the rules and end the filibuster or reform it in some way that would allow them to pass this, because we've seen unified Republican opposition to this. So you need 60 votes to pass legislation like this in the Senate. Democrats don't even have 50 right now. And that shows you why they are struggling so hard on this. And that shows you also the White House dilemma right now. They look at an infrastructure bill. It's something where they feel like they do have, or at least will ultimately have, the support there to pass it. But when it comes to this voting bill, the votes just really, really aren't there right now. And so the question is, how do you get there? And there's no real clear answer at this point. Every time Democrats put pressure on Senator Manchin, he does not tend to react positively in public. So the White House and some allies have been very delicate. So there's no real solution right now for how Democrats are going to pass this legislation. And unless things change, the votes simply are not going to be there when the Senate decides to take this up later this month.
All right. A lot of frustrated lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Sean Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks.